Hey, everybody, I'm Allison Gill, host of the Daily Beans podcast. Welcome to my weekly wrap-up in partnership with Midas Touch. As we feared, the exploitation of the death of Charlie Kirk is underway on the right, with the Trump administration pulling every lever in favor of running roughshod over our enumerated rights. So today, I'll be discussing the ouster of Jimmy Kimmel and the chilling impact on free speech, as well as more threats from the FCC. But other things happened this week, too, including a judge dismissing Trump's absurd lawsuit against the New York Times and a litany of all new embarrassing failures by the Justice Department. So for the week ending September 21st, this is the breakdown. This week, during an appearance on the Russian-funded Tenet Media Benny Johnson podcast, FCC Chair Brendan Carr had this to say.
And they have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. This kind of indirect threat against First Amendment protected speech is called jawboning, and it's been called unconstitutional by this Supreme Court. In fact, just last year, in a unanimous ruling, Justice Sotomayor wrote, citing a Bantam Books v. Sullivan case, today the court reaffirms what it has said then. Government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. The Supreme Court also found that, quote, ultimately, Bantam Books stands for the principle that a government official cannot directly or indirectly coerce a private party to punish or suppress disfavored speech. But that's precisely what happened in the case of Jimmy Kimmel. A former FCC chair warned Wired magazine, quote, Brendan Carr will push it until he is stopped. Congress has been silent on this. There hasn't been a basis to get this to court. He's been very artful in not making formal decisions that are appealable to the court, but instead having these informal coercive activities that are not appealable. And so until Congress or the courts say he can't, he'll keep doing this. So this needs to go to court. I think ABC is too chicken shit to sue, but maybe Disney will rethink this after they see how many people are canceling their Disney Plus subscriptions. Maybe Jimmy Kimmel will sue. He did meet with ABC and his lawyers this week. But what happened to the Brendan Carr who said in 2019, should the government censor speech it doesn't like? Of course not. Or how about when he said in 2023, free speech is the counterweight. It is the check on government control. That's why censorship is the authoritarian's dream. Or in 2022, when he said, President Biden is right. Political satire is one of the oldest and most important forms of free speech. It challenges those in power while using humor to draw people into the discussion. That's why people in influential positions, like the FCC chair, have always targeted it for censorship. But since Brendan Carr's been in the Trump administration, he's opened investigations into NPR and PBS. He's threatened Comcast over their coverage of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He oversaw the Paramount Skydance merger, which saw the end of Stephen Colbert, forced the end of DEI at CBS, and resulted in a settlement over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. After all, it's probably the potential merger of Nexstar and Trenga, worth over $6 billion, that led ABC to axing Jimmy Kimmel. That a single person can own enough ABC affiliates to influence the entire network should be illegal. The consolidation of corporate media, especially the news media, into the hands of a few billionaires continues to scare the shit out of me. The media should report the narrative, not create it, as they've done here. And the corporate media seems to be running with the idea that Kimmel said the shooter was MAGA. He did not say that. He said MAGA is trying to pin it on anyone but themselves. That's very different. And for the corporate media to dictate the truth as opposed to just reporting it, such as the Kirk shooter espousing transgender ideology, whatever that is, or Kimmel saying the shooter was MAGA, is irresponsible AF. The corporate media is also running with these text messages between the shooter and his roommate as absolute truth. Now, I haven't made a call on their validity because I haven't seen the actual text messages. What's in the charging document, the DOJ says, is a transcribed narrative. And Kash Patel told Fox News the actual text messages are destroyed, but that he was able to recover these on site while in the apartment. That's funny how you can recover deleted text messages here, but not the deleted January 6th Secret Service text messages. But none of the stipulations about the texts are being reported. They're just running with, these are the texts, without any caveats. Trump has also expressed a desire to go after Seth Meyers and Saturday Night Live and The View. But Brian Kilmeade of Fox News can call for the execution of unhoused people by involuntary lethal injection and remain on the air. The right to free speech is a pillar of democracy, and it cuts both ways. Pam Bondi, though, she wants to use the full force of the Justice Department to prosecute people who are failing to mourn Charlie Kirk properly. Anyone who directly quotes him, she says, amounts to hate speech, and hate speech isn't free speech. There is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. So Bondi was forced to walk back her statements after fierce backlash from the Trump administration, not because they love free speech, but because they love hate speech. Remember when Matt Taibbi brought the Twitter files to Congress to complain that the Biden administration was coercing Twitter to apply its terms of service against, COVID disinformation or violence, when it was actually Donald Trump's White House applying pressure to remove a Chrissy Teigen tweet?
Ms. Naravoli, earlier you testified about a 2019 tweet that was about President Trump, and I think it was from Ms. Teigen. What was the tweet about?
Would you like me to give the direct quote?
Yeah.
Please excuse my language. This is a direct quote, but Chrissy Teigen referred to Donald Trump as a pussy-ass bitch.
Okay.
I love that that's in the congressional record, by the way. Of course, there are examples from history that we could learn from about the dangers of dictators targeting political satire, which is probably why the administration wants to gut museums and history books and ban other books, because then maybe we won't learn that Joseph Goebbels had 5 actors fired in 1939 for making fun of the Nazi regime. Even Ted Cruz disagrees with Brendan Carr on this. As you may know, Ted Cruz has a podcast. He has a podcast. Here it is at number 39 on the charts. Oh, hey, who's that? Number 38. But even Ted Cruz thinks what Brendan Carr did is a bridge too far. And I'm not going to play the clip because no one should be forced to listen to Ted Cruz, but trust me, he says it. And of course, any and all attempts by congressional Democrats to investigate Brendan Carr's violations of the First Amendment this week were thwarted by congressional Republicans. Killing resolutions to subpoena Brendan Carr brought forth by Ro Khanna, for example. Reason number 7,863 to win the House back in 2026. So what can we do? Well, you can do what I did, cancel Disney Plus and Hulu. Boycotts can work. Just look at Target. Their CEO had to step down after being there for over a decade. And after the American Teachers Federation Union and other teachers unions called for a boycott of Target, they took a 5% hit during back to school week. Target and Costco went up by 5%. So pushing back by canceling the Washington Post, Paramount, Disney, Hulu, that can actually have an impact. But Kimmel wasn't the only free speech casualty this week. The last Black opinion writer at the Washington Post, Karen Attiah, was fired by the Bezos-owned birdcage liner of a paper, and she wrote this on her Substack. The Post accused my Measured Blue Sky posts of being unacceptable, gross misconduct, and of endangering the physical safety of colleagues, charges without evidence, which I reject completely as false. They rushed to fire me without even a conversation, claiming disparagement on race. This was not only a hasty overreach, but a violation of the very standard of journalistic fairness and rigor the Post claims to uphold. And if that weren't enough, based on botched corporate media reports that the gunman espoused Antifa and transgender ideologies, Donald Trump this week declared Antifa a domestic terror organization, even though Antifa isn't an actual thing, and there's no such thing as a domestic terror organization under law, and without acknowledging that if you're anti-fascist, you're a fascist. That's kind of weird, but I doubt that will stop the administration from labeling anyone they don't like as Antifa, an Antifa terrorist. And the Heritage Foundation urged the FBI to add a new designation to its list of domestic violent extremist groups for transgender ideology-inspired violent extremism, falsely claiming violence from trans people and allies is on the rise. But let's say you wanted to fact check that. Let's say you wanted to do some research. I'm going to do my own research about how many domestic violence extremist groups are left-wing and how many are right-wing. Well, don't go looking on the Department of Justice website, because on September 11th, the day after Charlie Kirk's death, Pam Bondi quietly removed a study from the DOJ website that found, quote, militant, nationalistic, white supremacist violent extremism has increased in the United States, and the number of far-right attacks continues to outpace all other types of terrorism and domestic violent extremism. They do not want you to know that there's no such thing as transgender ideology-inspired violent extremism, and that it's all right-wing. This is a pretext to decimate liberty. I feel the same way about the military strikes on the boats in the Caribbean. The Trump regime is telling us that these Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists were all headed to the U.S. armed with drugs as weapons. He used the same pretext to disappear 250 people to El Salvador in the middle of the night. And I'm sure he'll use these attacks as justification to invoke more emergency powers for himself. And this week, the administration told journalists they aren't allowed to report on anything from the Pentagon without clearing it with the regime first. So, use manufactured predatory incursions as pretext to consolidate power, check, silence dissidents, check, and control the narrative. Then, prosecute your political opposition. But there's one small problem with that. Well, 12. Trump is desperate for his Justice Department to go after his political opposition. Fortunately, they keep coming up short. We learned this week that Trump allies pressured the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James for mortgage fraud and Jim Comey for lying to Congress. But the U.S. attorney, Eric Siebert, refused to seek indictments because he said there's not any evidence. The Trump administration threatened to fire Eric Siebert, and that led to his resignation on Friday. And in other DOJ news, a trial jury in Los Angeles returned a not guilty verdict in the case of a man who the DOJ claimed assaulted a Border Patrol agent. The DOJ couldn't get a federal grand jury to return a felony indictment, so they charged him with a misdemeanor, which does not require a federal grand jury. And they took him to trial for a misdemeanor. The defendant, Brian Ramos Brito, was represented by a public defender, which is awesome. And they actually held a trial for a misdemeanor. They even flew in Gregory Bovino. This Chad. Have you seen this guy, this Rambo, MAGA, incel, tough guy? He was at the MacArthur Park invasion in Los Angeles. Now he's in Chicago, terrorizing communities there. They flew this guy out to L.A. from Chicago. They put him on a plane to testify in a misdemeanor trial. You paid for that flight, by the way. So he flew to LA and testified that he witnessed Ramos Brito hit a Border Patrol agent. But video of the incident shows that the agent hit Ramos Brito, not the other way around. So Bovino lied about what he saw in court. Then the awesome public defender brought up the fact that Bovino has referred to immigrants as scum, filth, and trash. And Bovino lied again, saying, I was referring to one specific criminal alien. But the public defender read from the reprimand of his job, of Bovino, that's in his file, that Bovino signed, saying he said it about all undocumented immigrants. It took the trial jury about an hour to acquit Ramos Brito. These prosecutors can't get past a grand jury, and when they skirt the grand jury by charging a misdemeanor, they can't get past the trial jury. Absolutely embarrassing for the Department of Justice. And everyone, if you get a jury summons, maybe don't ask to be excused this time. And because I like to end on an up note, Trump recently sued the New York Times for $15 billion. The lawsuit is absurd. In it, he brags about how amazing he is, saying thanks solely to President Trump's sui generis charisma and unique business acumen, The Apprentice generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and remained on television for over 13 years with nearly 200 episodes. The Apprentice represented the cultural magnitude of President Trump's singular brilliance, which captured the zeitgeist of our time. The lawsuit has pictures of his buildings, bragging about what an amazing real estate developer he is. He brags about his illustrious career in the media. President Trump's hundreds of history-making media appearances and roles include WrestleMania 5 and All My Children. It goes on like this for like 80 plus pages. And he filed the suit in the Middle District of Florida, and the case was assigned to Judge Stephen Merriday. That's a G.W. Bush appointee. And within 4 days, Merriday tossed the suit. In his ruling, the judge says, as every member of the bar of every federal court knows or is presumed to know, Rule 8A requires that a complaint include a short and plain statement of the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief. He continues, even assuming that each allegation in this complaint is true, even assuming that at trial the plaintiff offers evidence supporting every allegation in the complaint, and that the evidence is accepted by the jury as fact, and even assuming that after finally melting the defendant's alleged iceberg of falsehoods, the plaintiff prevails for each reason alleged in the complaint, even assuming all of that, a complaint remains an improper and impermissible place for the tedious and burdensome aggregation of prospective evidence, for the rehearsal of tendentious arguments, or for the protracted recitation and explanation of legal authority. This complaint stands unmistakably and inexcusably athwart the requirements of Rule 8. This action will begin, will continue, and will end in accord with the rules and procedures, and in a professional and dignified manner. The complaint is therefore struck with leave to amend within 28 days. The amended complaint must not exceed 40 pages, excluding only the caption, the signature, and any attachment. I hope the Times files a motion for sanctions against these lawyers. But all of this is why fighting back is so important. All of this shows how weak Trump is. He is a paper tiger. Now, if you capitulate to him, there's no guarantee you're going to be rewarded or safe. In fact, it's usually the opposite. But if you stand up to him, you learn how weak he is. E. Jean Carroll talked about that, sitting across from him in a Manhattan courtroom, that he's just a small man and nothing more. He can be defeated, and those who are bothering to stand up to him are finding that out. I'm Allison Gill. Thanks for watching The Breakdown.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.